Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Pedophile Huntress. We're each here tonight with a common goal that you be encouraged in heart and united in love. We welcome you all. Tonight, back with me for panel discussion number two of Breaking Family Ties is Emily and Carol Boyce, author of First, I Believe You. Last week, well, it was actually a week before that, we began to talk about breaking family ties. It was a very popular broadcast, and it was also one that we barely kind of touched the surface on. So we wanted to come back with you tonight. And I thought, ladies, it would be good if we kind of talked about where we are with our families. And I'll open up. I don't talk a lot about that I have not seen my brothers or sisters for many years, maybe some of them 10 or more, maybe 15. I think I saw my brother once in kind of a volatile situation because my husband confronted him. After that, he had his fourth heart attack. These are really complicated situations, right? My nephews and nieces, I used to see, but I stayed with them until they grew, just so they knew that they had an advocate on their side. So that's kind of where I stand. Took me and my children and my grandchildren away from my family of origin, and we set sail on a different course. And so that's my path. Carol, why don't you go ahead and open up and tell us where you are right now with your family?
Um, so I'm one of four children. My mother died a long time ago, so she never even heard about this, the sexual abuse. My father passed away just 2 years ago, but I only saw him maybe once or twice, at family events over 30 years, because I
Mm,
remembered about 30 years ago. So didn't see them, it was him at all, and it was real difficult for many reasons. My siblings, I I don't tend to see much anyway, but I haven't really been talking to them for the last year or two. And it's really heartbreaking, but
okay.
I yeah.
And Emily, what's your situation? I think it just helps bring the listener into where we're
Mhm.
at and then to go into the discussion. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I have been like completely separated, no communication with the young man who was my abuser since 2016. I had been kind of pressured to stay in touch with him, pressured to communicate through my family up until that point, and finally I was able to say that's not okay at that point. And he was framed as my brother, so that's why I
Yeah.
bring it up.
Right.
And then the last communication I had with my parents was June 17th, 2021. I sent them a
Oh,
letter, each separately, because they were hiding things from each other. So that was a letter I sent to them, certified mail, that I wanted to not have contact with them anymore. And then so that was June 17th, 2021. Then I sent letters to my sister and some other family members following that, just to let them know what was going on. And I had already talked with them on the phone about it all through that year and some of a lot of work that I was doing. So I have not had much contact with my sister since then, just little bits here and there. Like you, Jody, I wanted to stay in touch with my nephews because she has sons, and I feel that they're in a very dangerous situation.
mhm.
And so I almost want them to know, there's someone on the outside and there's a safe
Right.
person.
There's a predator.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm outside of their system, but
Mhm.
hopefully they can see me as a safe person. So I've stayed in touch with them through sending gifts and letters and that kind of thing, but not actual visits, which is really difficult.
It
And
isn't.
then
Oh, go ahead. Nope,
I
you
don't have
finish.
any other siblings, just my one sister. but I am in touch more closely with some extended family. One second cousin who's very supportive, and so that's good to have that. But I'm still trying to figure out some relationships with like aunts and uncles. It's ongoing.
Mhm.
Like even now, we're trying to decide about an aunt that wants to come visit, and okay, what does that look like? So I'm kind of concluding we're going to meet in a neutral space, like a park that's not in our city, and have a picnic and have it not be anything too personal. So, mhm,
Right. And that, yeah, I mean, it is very complicated. And that's kind of why I wanted us to talk about that for a minute. I've been on this healing journey for a long time, since about 35, and then really kind of stepped into it probably 40, 45, and just said, I've got to, because it takes a long time to decide that you're going to leave family, because
mhm,
right where one of the things that family gives you is a sense of connection. It gives you a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
And the other thing about having a family unit, as I thought about this, you guys, after we talked last time, was it really gives us a lack of accountability, because the family unit cohesively together kind of brings accountability. So when you step out of that family unit, you're on your own. You're on your own
mhm.
for your story, you're on your own for your healing, you're on, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about that. It's interesting. You have to find, so accountability becomes really strong. You are accountable for every action you take. It just feels, I don't know, like 100 pounds more heavy every step that you take in the
Mhm.
beginning. But then it's also hard to find connection and
Mhm,
belonging when you step
mhm,
away from your family. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. I Yeah, I think that's the heartbreak of it is, I think we're all biologically wired to want that family and to belong. That's our kind of sense of safety. And so mentally it's very, very hard not to have that. And it shows a lot of growth, I think, when you do start letting go of some of these primary relationships in your life. When you feel like, I can handle this, I believe in myself and my narrative enough that I can stand up for myself. And most of us did not when we were little. We were never taught that.
Oh,
So,
100%.
yeah, I think that's an important aspect of it. And I think specifically to incest, it is, when it's intra-family, it is so much harder mentally because of the trust and these,
Mhm.
primary uh, responsibilities our parents had that they completely let go of. And so it adds to that pain. But the reality is the families don't tend to support us. And the closer they are, I said this last week, the closer they are, the harder it is for them to support us. So
mhm.
Right. That's huge. And we'll talk about that in a minute when after Emily goes. I do want to talk about what the relationships look like, because they really aren't supportive, and yet they
no.
still give us connection and belonging. They're separate things. But go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, I was thinking about it, and I've talked a lot with my therapist about this. The thing is that I don't think, okay, I think my grandparents really knew me. I think the ones I
Mhm.
spent so much time with, I think they really knew me, and we had a actual authentic family connection. And what's interesting is my grandfather passed away in 2014 and my grandmother passed away in 2016. And I think that was actually the start of me really realizing I didn't fit in my family, and I didn't want to be there anymore because they were really my primary bond or
Mhm.
connection there. And I realized that my family and I never really knew each other, or they didn't know me. They never really knew
Mhm.
me. So it was a very grievous process, though, to realize I never really
Yeah.
had a family, like that true um belonging in a
Mhm.
nuclear family. But it's true. I've thought about it a lot. Like, I am not very attached to very many people. Like, I'm attached
Right.
to just a handful of people. And it's an interesting thing because um I do believe humans need attachment, and we need to be in community and grow through life together and all that.
Mhm.
Um, so I know I need to cultivate that in other places and to be mindful of that need of myself, because I've had so little true attachment in my life that I'm almost like fine, right? Like, because that's how
Yeah,
it's
I
always been for
right.
me.
You know what?
That
I
I don't
think
think it's necessarily good.
no, Carol and I
Mhm.
can probably say we 100% understand. One of the things that's interesting that you just said was your grandmother. And you know, when my grandmother on my mom's side actually was kind of like my angel in the nursery, as they say. I've heard that term, counselors use it, but she definitely was the person who gave me enough to survive. And meeting Jesus when I was just this little tiny girl where nobody even knows how, but I don't know, he just came to my room and visited me, and that's a whole nother story. But when she passed, it's very interesting that I too went away from my family because I had nothing left. And so when we talk about, you guys, what the what it really looks like. We're sitting at the table with people who usually lie, who are so good at deception that they can make you believe anything, and no matter, they'll just lie even if they're caught, they lie to the end, and they'll continue to tell the same story, and they'll use your siblings against you. They'll use everything against you to keep their narrative alive, the narrative of what's not healthy and good. And so I think breaking that deception is huge, isn't it? Because
Mhm.
the cost of stepping into the truth is stepping outside of the family. Now you're going to be alone and alienated
Yeah.
because if you don't keep their narrative, they're not going to keep you around. So talk a little bit about that, right? Because there really is some deception in the family. And I'll say this and then throw the ball back to you guys. But I was talking to my daughter yesterday, and she's conservative, and I tend to be very conservative, coming from a hellacious, horrible childhood where my parents were incredibly liberal, right? When you can do anything you want sexually,
Mhm.
that's, to me, that's pretty liberal.
Pretty liberal.
But guess what? They lived as strict conservatives they presented to
Mm,
everybody. So I told her I became this conservative little girl around a bunch of horrible liberals.
mhm,
And they still live that way. I mean, drinking and taking pills, and before my dad died. And she was like, "Mom, that's so interesting because dad, her father, always acted conservative, but he was terribly liberal. He slept with men, he slept with women, while he was married to me.
uh,
We could go on and on and on. So there is this weird dichotomy where what they represent is totally and 100% wholeheartedly not who they are. Does that
mm.
resonate with you guys?
My parents were pretty conservative, and they didn't have that kind of wild left kind of, or that other side. So I think it kind of shows every family is unique, you know.
But
But
having your father come to your room every night, wouldn't
it
you
is
call that
not yeah,
that's quite a
yeah.
liberty? So that's what I mean
Well,
by,
okay,
Mhm.
you see what
that's
I'm
true.
saying though?
That's true.
Mhm.
So it's actually not true that he was conservative. When you go into your daughter's room to rape her, that's as liberal as the territory gets, as far as I'm concerned. You see what I'm saying? So
Mhm.
it
Hmm.
is this dichotomy where you even believed they were conservative. That's not conservative. Not by any
No, they
stretch of the
present no, but
imagination.
they were very, they're strict, and I know,
I know what you're saying.
they had they the household was very tightly run, and and many good things about that. Um, but yeah, but I
Well,
did want to say that what I hear, I think the biggest loss that we have is this maternal figure. I think
mm,
this kind of not feeling like you belong in a family is because there was
mhm.
not that nurturing, that piece of understanding you is kind of more typically mother driven. And
Wow, that's really good.
and I see that, this kind of idea that mother kind of is the glue in that
Mhm.
in families frequently, not to, you know, make it the only way that role can be fill out, but that's what it frequently is. And I think it kind of shows that the mothers were also just not doing that piece of the family. So then there isn't anything really there, you know.
Well, see,
But
and that's all part of this deception, though. They keep the
yeah.
deception alive, is what makes the cover so good. But what a beautiful part. I think I'm not going to speak for each one of us, but I can certainly tell you there are times in my adult life today where I'll wake up either in physical pain or emotional pain or have a bad dream. And you know what I'll think in my heart? I wish I
Mhm.
had a mom. I wish I had a
Yeah.
mom.
Yeah,
Because
I
I
do
don't,
too.
I've never had a mother that came and comforted me ever. I don't even know what that feels like.
No,
Emily,
I don't
go
either.
ahead and talk about that for a minute.
Okay, there are a lot of things. So I was thinking about, um, I feel like my parents have this self ideal of who they
Hmm.
want to be and who they want the world to see them as, and they feel a very big obligation to do certain things that they see as being biblical, or doing things in the
Hmm.
church that are what they believe is right, and correcting other people to do those things like that. But then the actual heart of it is just not love. And in terms of their lifestyle choices and all that, my parents were conservative, and I believe still are. The only thing where I always felt a little weird was my dad's musical choice and his love of watching um, certain music videos and things like that that just felt kind of off and yucky to me. Um,
Mm.
not not
Hmm.
nice. And um in terms of the maternal care, I think my mom is very ill in her mind, and I think she tried but was not able to
Able
be
to
a
do
mother
it.
to me.
Hmm.
So, and I still feel that way even now. I think she's very
Hmm.
sad about the situation, but in even a letter she wrote to me, she stated she could see that we would need to be separate for a time, because she's not able to live in a way that is actually caring to me. And so, what I think is amazing is that she was able to recognize it,
Yeah.
and yet she also is not able to change, that I've seen in 30 some years, and I'm not willing to risk it anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yes, about the maternal piece for sure. And it's hard, but I'm grateful because I do have older women in my life that I can talk to. Like, my mother-in-law is a wonderful support, and I work with women who are
Mm.
older, and I've had neighbors who I'm connected with who've been so kind. And meeting you
Wonderful.
two is such a wonderful thing. So
It
I think
is.
I
Oh,
think God gives us
Hmm.
um opportunities to connect with people. I do think it takes courage to connect. It takes
mhm.
courage to
Yeah.
let yourself be known, and to take the leap and live in your story for what it is. Um,
Yeah.
Right.
mhm.
So, and kind of staying on that, Carol, and I love that talking about a mom. It's true
Mm.
because let's talk about some other things about when you really break the nucleus of the family apart. There just really isn't a lot that we're losing. I mean, I've learned after all of these years living away from them how much better I've gotten. My
Mhm.
children are better. It was just constant chaos and pain when I was
Yes.
there.
Hmm.
And so, and the lack of not being able to be authentic, right? So like if I went to the table, I certainly couldn't tell my story. Or if I did, I was kind of silenced.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, going out to a dinner party and everybody's talking about their childhood and bringing up good stories. And, that happens a lot in life.
It
And then
happens.
all of a sudden, I
And
think,
you're like,
oh
what am
my
I gonna add
God.
here?
Ooh.
So I actually did a blog post about, I'm sorry you can't tell your story, because you know what? I can never tell my story. And
Yeah.
yet, so it feels so good to be with people where you can, but being in families like that, you sit around a table and you learn to bullshit because that's what everybody does, right? Like you don't bring your
Yeah.
pain to the table, you bring this inauthentic self that's
Hmm.
usually taking care of the abuser because it's an abuser centric, world.
Yeah.
It's just funny how that goes. And so if they're hiding one abuser, they're going to hide all abusers, right? So
Mhm.
what else you guys do these families? I mean, because if you really break it down, what are we leaving behind? Not a ton,
Not
right?
much.
Sadly.
That's a real hard one for me. And I do think my family had a lot of really good things that were going on, which is pretty unusual, I think, in this context. Um, yeah, and it's been very hard for me not to feel tremendous loss there. But,
Mhm.
you know, I have to be around people that support me. I have to be around people
Mhm.
that are willing to, yeah, be there, listen to me. I just can't do that anymore where,
Mhm.
people are fighting me and questioning, what
Mhm.
I've been through. I just don't need that. So, but I think that's a good point, Jody. Like what are you really letting go of,
Mhm.
not real healthy environments. So,
Right.
um, yeah.
I think
And
what you said about finish, Carol.
no, that's all right. I think you can't emphasize enough that sexual abuse is a disaster for families.
Mhm.
Oh,
There's no other way
right.
around it. It is
Right.
an absolute disaster. It's like setting a bomb off in a family. And we try to keep it all together and, not keep our role or whatever for a lot of years. And then you just have to let go.
Mhm.
You just, because the bomb's gone off. We haven't had anything to do with it. We're not
Mhm.
responsible in any way. And yet, that's why it's so horrible. That's the
Mhm.
main reason it's so horrible, that these are families that are already full of dysfunction, or
Mhm.
the sexual abuse wouldn't work, that
Mhm.
incest wouldn't be happening if you had people listening to you
Right.
and supportive and
Or
all those,
listening to each other.
or each
Mhm.
other, right?
Right.
All those good things, and
Right.
free of any kind of, the alcoholism, drug abuse.
Right.
It takes many systems to allow incest to occur. And
Right.
so I think, that bomb we're dealing with all the time. And
Mhm.
and particularly with incest, it occurs, um, sexual abuse occurs in certain ways, but incest occurs much younger and
Mhm.
much longer usually than
Mhm.
any kind of other kind of sexual abuse. So it's extremely
Mhm.
disastrous. And at any
Mhm.
level, a 10-year-old starts talking about it, an adolescent starts talking about it, or a 20-year-old or a 35-year-old, like kind of Jody and I were doing. It's a different ball game, and it's perceived as differently.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to kind of respect those issues that go on too. So like you say, I could go on about that, but
No, it's good. Go ahead. I mean,
you
Mhm.
know,
it's
um,
very true. It's
yeah,
very true.
it's very true. And this whole thing of your family not believing you, which is what
Mhm.
usually happens, has a lot to do too with how you remembered it. Did you always know this was going on,
Mhm.
or did it come to you when you were much older?
Right.
And all of a sudden, you have this horrible reality that affects a whole lot about whether that family's gonna believe you, not believe you, and support you in any way. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of aspects to how it impacts
Right.
the family, you
There,
know.
there is. And with that, Carol, most often, and you can do the research on this, when you have a pedophile in a house, pedophiles don't skip over children. They just don't do it. It's not in the statistics, it's not anywhere. if there's a
Mhm.
family member who was raped for years and years and years, you can almost be sure there's another one. And I don't
Mm,
care who says that's not true. It's just not factual.
mm,
Pedophiles abuse all kids. They don't hop over, like, oh, I'm not gonna, that kind of thing. Usually,
mhm,
and so the reason I say that is when other siblings come against other siblings, it's usually so that they don't have to identify their own story. But
mm.
Emily, go ahead.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Very interesting.
I feel like my family has tried to carefully construct themselves, if that makes sense. Like they want to craft this perfect family environment. So everything is very planned and very controlled and very crafted to please my mother, crafted to make my mother look good, crafted to keep my father comfortable. He has type
Mhm.
1 diabetes, and I think that's a big piece of it. So what you said, Jody, about being around a table, it's all about making sure that my mom knows that we're all appreciative and that she can
Oh,
be behind the scenes, but we all know that it's really all this work she's done to create a memory. So it's all very like shiny, and it all needs to be shiny
Mhm.
all the time for the
Surface.
and
for
keep that
the
curb appeal
Right.
going.
to
The
themselves
curb
though. Like
appeal,
this
yes.
Yeah.
could happen in a complete vacuum. It's
Yep,
like we need to keep
yep,
this
yep.
up for ourselves,
Right.
and we need to make sure that these two, the who's now the grandfather and the grandmother, are like
Mhm.
catered to. But they make it look, my mom in particular makes it look like she's catering to everyone else, but what's actually going on is so she can see herself as
Yeah.
being in service to everyone. So it's very
An
So
angel.
wearying.
so you're saying it's self-fulfilling.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. And it's
Right.
everyone else plays along, right?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
It's very wearying, and if a child deviates from that, neither of my parents can handle it. And so when my child came along and she was being a normal child, neither of my parents could handle it. And that's when I knew,
Mhm.
like, this
Yeah.
isn't
Wow.
safe.
Ah,
This isn't
Yeah.
right.
safe.
Yeah.
So, in terms of what I've lost, I was fine playing the role until I had a child who was like not able to, and I saw how ugly it was. Um,
She
and
didn't
so,
understand the rules.
and she
Yeah,
was just
exactly.
being herself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And
the
then,
unspoken rules.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so, what I realized is that there's not it, the times with the family are not actually loving. They're just a charade.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
yeah. And in terms of are some good things that are sad to lose. I do agree
Yeah.
with you, Carol. But at the same time, I was injured. I was hemorrhaging, right? Like
Yeah.
Mhm.
I needed help, and no one really cared to help because they all wanted to keep up the shiny
Mm-hmm. Pin.
charade.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so even
yeah.
if they knew separately that I was going through something, what shocked me is that any communication about any of it was put on me. So I was abused starting at age 7. I spoke up about it at age 9. The punishment was put on me. I spoke up about it at age 12.
Oh,
It
it's
was
just
shut down
horrible.
and I had to
So
carry it.
sorry.
When I tried to discuss with
Mm.
them, every time it's like, well, this is your thing and
Gosh.
you're going to have to heal, and we hope you get through it. And we've never had a family conversation about it. And I decided
Yeah.
I can't
That's
lead my
abhorrent.
own.
It's
Yeah,
abhorrent.
I
I'm so
cannot.
sorry, Emily.
I know.
Well,
I'm so
And
sorry
that's
didn't
too.
you say, of which I'm still horrified, you were beaten from it? Didn't your father at one
yes,
point beat
yes,
you?
Oh
I
my
mean,
yes.
gosh.
it's just
So,
unbelievable.
so to me, the whole thing is such a fake.
Yeah.
That I didn't feel sad about leaving that part
Yeah.
at all. I was
Yeah.
happy because it felt like escaping from a horrible scary, awful
Right.
fake dream, like,
you were
yeah.
escaping from a horrible, awful dream, but it wasn't
And
a
good for
dream.
you,
It was,
Emily, protecting your
yes.
child. Your child has to go first, has to come
Yeah.
first. And
So,
like Jody has said, you need to get away from these families. If
mhm,
they're not facing up to the sexual abuse and all these things, even if they didn't personally do it, these are systems that are very, very
mhm.
damaging. And you got to get your kids away.
Yep.
I think
Yep.
that's rule number one.
Well, it is. And that actually leads me right into the other thing that I wanted to talk about. So we talked about what it looks like to go and all of those things, but talk about the cost of staying. This
Mm-hmm.
is another way to say it. The cost of staying is huge. And I heard you say, Emily, when my daughter, and then all of a sudden you see your daughter being treated like that, and you're like, oh no,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you can
No.
do this to me, but you will not do this to my children. The cost of staying is huge, you guys.
Yes.
I did a
Mm-hmm.
blog post called The Cost of Healing Delayed. And so it delays your healing, but there's a high cost to that. And the other part that's really horrible is when people don't talk about abuse, they could be an
Mhm.
abuser. I'm not going to go point my finger at people and say, but the truth is that a lot of people that have been abused
Mm.
do become abusers. And now all of a sudden you're
Mm-hmm.
going to bring your children around these people who are not talking about it, who are keeping it hidden. I
Mhm.
Yeah.
cannot tell you guys how many family members I have gone to and said that man is not safe. There is this, and this. I
Yeah.
mean, there were bloody underwear, all these things. You know what people say? Oh no, Jody, you're just this person that wants to look. You're the person that maybe does just not even going to help yourself if you just don't be quiet. I have done everything I can to keep these people safe. And you know what they still just do? Oh no, they don't want to burden their own life by
Mm-hmm.
protecting a child. They'd rather
Mhm.
go on and have a cupcake or whatever the hell they're doing. I don't know what's more important. But the
Mhm.
cost to stay in these families is
Mhm.
huge, you guys. So talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and like as soon as I got memories that I had been molested, and it was like just in one, moment, I finally realized what was so wrong in my life. And it was like I couldn't have anything to do with my father again. It was
Mhm.
it. I knew it was
Yeah.
over that minute. And I know a lot of people kind of keep skirting along. Um, but I also think, yeah, I just couldn't do it. And it was very hard on everybody. My siblings completely rallied around my father for the
Mhm.
next 30 years. He was just worship till the day he
Mhm.
died. And
And
but anyway.
that's sad. To me, that's
Mhm.
tragedy. And you know, when we talk about loss,
Mhm.
it's okay. I mean, I actually really do grieve that my mother and my father were not different people. You know, I
Mhm.
don't it's a sincere grief that I have. I've
Mhm.
healed to the point where I'm pretty indifferent with my mom anymore. You long to have a mother, but I don't long to have
Yeah.
her arms because her arms were very
Mm-mm.
hurtful and she's never changed. But it is
And she's
okay, I
still
think.
alive. Yeah.
She is still
Alive.
Mhm.
alive. Yeah,
Mhm.
she is. And you know what? I every once in a while will reach out to her, but then I think, why did I do that? Why did I
Yeah.
expect a different answer? And
Yes.
and so I don't really put my heart expectation up, but I just always think, damn, I really wish that you'd be a different person.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I keep myself safe. I keep my children and
Yes.
grandchildren at a far, far distance. But Emily,
Mhm.
talk about that a little bit. I think that it's okay for us to feel the loss. That's
Mhm.
to me a healthy thing. I think grief is a positive thing that
Yeah.
we need to
Yeah.
be okay with, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And going back to the cost of staying, I mean,
Yes.
I think for me, in order to stay, I had to stay compartmentalized. Like I had to keep
Mhm. Mhm.
my real needs out of my
Oh, so true.
consciousness so that I could proceed with the family because my needs were so opposite of what the family was doing. So the cost of it was
Right.
further damage to myself, um, and promoting the dysfunction. So
Yeah.
that's what I was doing. And then when my child came along, the cost of staying was me being stressed out all the time when I was with my
Right.
parents because I was constantly vigilant
Yeah.
And I set up boundaries with them of like, these are the rules. This is what we're going to do. Cause I was trying to stay in relationship with protection.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just like, there's no relaxing then
Oh,
because,
it's so much
Mm-hmm.
work. I've been gone for a
yeah.
long time, but it is so
So
much work.
it was very hard and there was no trust and there was
Mhm.
no true friendship because it was just like management and fear. And then when the patterns started towards my daughter as she got to be her own person, around
Yeah.
18 months old, um, then the cost was seeing them start to be so mean to her.
Yeah.
And then there was conflict because I stood up for her and I was like, you're not going to do this.
Right.
And then that heightened my dad's behavior because he's a bully. So if you speak against him, he'll increase.
Mhm.
He's volatile and very haughty. So if I spoke up, then he would
Get worse.
magnify what he did.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so it was not comfortable. It was always felt like more pain, more wounds.
Yeah.
So the cost of staying was having to then go to a few more therapy sessions just to get over that visit. And
Oh,
it
it's
just
so
became
true.
it
Yeah.
became a cycle of drama. And I was like, this is not
Mhm.
love. And there's no changing this. This is how my family
Mhm.
lives. So it's like,
Well, it
it
keeps the
would
wounds
be,
open, doesn't it?
yeah. So
Yeah.
it's
It
interesting because there's that shiny side of the family that my mom's trying to maintain all the time. So I was trying
Mhm.
to like play into that. And then there's this volatile bully of my father. So it was a constant tension and trying to keep everyone happy and me from getting too hurt and my daughter from getting too hurt and not good. So the cost was mental health. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And Lord knows when we're trying to recover, our heads are blowing off anyway with
Yes.
issues, right? We
Yeah.
have so much going on. And when, I would go to some of my family events, extended family, and
Mhm.
I would just get lectured that this never happened and how could you do this? And
Mm.
telling my kids, I had relatives that went up to my adult kids and said, your mother is just lying. This never
Oh my
happened. Oh
God.
yeah, yeah, big stuff. And telling my nieces and nephews, that this has
Oh.
never happened. And this is after, I'm just trying so hard to keep my head above water, and
Mm.
Exactly.
yeah, and
So sad.
and I kept trying to make everything okay. I guess I
Hmm.
have a lot of that
Exactly.
in me, And I
Right.
wanted to throw out a question here. I'd like to hear you guys' opinions of how much does love play into this? Where do you see love?
Mm.
Is it that you had no
Yeah.
love for these people, or how is that perceived in this walking away from family?
Mm.
I think that's a complicated question because I think that love first has to be defined. When I was with my family of origin, I actually used to say something to myself when I was young. You guys, this is going to sound weird, but I used to tell myself, I don't want love, I want kindness. Because the love
Oh.
I
Mm.
knew had no kindness in it. And
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
I remember coming through the years thinking, if this is love, then I'll just look for kindness because I don't want this. And so
Mm.
Interesting. That
I
one's
think
very smart. You were
Yeah, you had
very perceptive
that was
for a young
really
girl. Yeah.
well, they
probably very protective of your core, you know?
right, right.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Hmm.
right, because there was such cruelty. So I think that
Mm.
the love card is so complicated with them, but really it's a toxic trauma bond. And
Hmm.
toxic trauma bonds feel
Mm-hmm.
stronger than real love bonds do,
Hmm.
because real love gives freedom. Real love
Hmm.
doesn't make you feel guilt. Real love doesn't make you feel shame. Toxic, disgusting, destroying love makes you feel shame, makes you feel guilt, makes you feel a
Hmm.
responsibility for the abuser. So I think that when you uncomplicate your mind with what real
Mm-hmm.
love looks like,
Hmm.
then I'm kind of hard pressed to say, I forgive you, but do I have to love you? Then,
Oh,
you know what I
yeah.
mean? So it gets a little bit, the
That's
lines
really
aren't,
important what you said. Yeah, really important.
the lines aren't
That
as
we have to
blurred.
define love really carefully.
We do.
Mhm.
You know, it's yeah, I don't know. How do you feel about that, Emily?
Well, I think I love the core of who my parents are
Yeah.
because I know that God made them, like they are important people.
Mm-hmm.
Every soul is important. But I cannot and I don't want to love the way they act and the way they choose to live. And so I'm not going to say it's okay for them to be that way. I don't actually think that's loving them because then that's like promoting them living in evil, and
Mm-hmm.
that's not loving them to endorse them living in with cruelty towards others. So I feel it's more loving to tell the truth and to challenge their narratives and their way.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they're growing, maybe they're changing when I'm not there. That's not my responsibility. I'm not,
Right.
you know, but I think that love has truth. So if you're living in a relationship based on lies, that's not love. And
Mm-hmm.
an actual loving way to be is in truth. And I don't think that involves necessarily
Mhm.
being like, I think you can be in truth without being actively hurtful towards another person. Like you can communicate truth, if that makes sense. Like
Mm-hmm.
in what I've tried to do, I've tried so hard to um speak to my family with honesty and truth, but also love. And in
Mhm.
terms of their love for me, I don't know. I don't know that I have not felt genuine love. I felt love towards what
Mm-hmm.
they want me to be. So
Right.
if I follow their expectation of me, then I feel an approval that
Yeah.
to them is love
Mhm.
because it serves them. But actual me, I don't feel much
Mm-hmm.
um, love towards who I truly am.
Because they
And
don't
then in
seem to
turn,
really know who you really are.
right. And if I
Mm-hmm.
if I try to engage with them in who I really am, they can't handle it because it's living in a different reality that they can't enter into without
Mm-hmm.
their own self-perception falling apart, if that makes sense. It's
Right.
kind of complicated. But then in terms of other people's perception of me towards my parents, of my choice, that's been very mixed. So I've
Mm-hmm.
had a couple family members who are supportive. I've had one aunt who said she's so proud of me and she wants me to write a memoir, right? So she sees it as she loves me for what I've done
Mm-hmm.
and who I am. And I have a cousin who's that way too, which I'm so grateful for. But then I have other family members who have accused me of having a seed of Satan planted in me,
Oh
and
God, that sounds like my father. He used to tell me that all the
like
time.
yeah, so I've
Right.
had a big mix of people who have one idea of what forgiveness and reconciliation looks like, and other people who um are willing and able to engage with me. So I know I'm loved by
Mm-hmm.
those people, and the others I don't think they understand or
Yeah.
will. Mhm.
Carol, how would you answer that question?
Uh, you know, I think I think I see, like, with my mother passing away way before any of this came to light,
Mhm.
I have to look back at her and think, she wasn't who I wanted her to be. She had all
Mhm.
kinds of emotional baggage, alcoholism, everything. But I now feel like I know the core of her was good. I believe that in people, that the core of them is good and loving. And you see that in glimpses of people, even when they do horrible things. So it felt like love to me, but I think even talking here, I'm going to think more about that. I mean, love is not approval, but as a child, it feels like that. When you get a parent's approval, it feels like love. My father used to rub my arm and smile at me, and I thought that's really love. But that was before I knew about
Mhm.
everything that he was
Right.
doing. So no, I don't know. I think you walk away from people even when you still love them.
Yeah, I do
You know, I
too.
think I think that's kind of where my head's going with that, that you can still love them, but
Mhm.
cannot be around them. And
Mhm.
I think another thing that happens in particularly families of incest is we get this kind of magical thinking. And I wonder if this magical thinking comes from them. And it sounds something like this: I'm going to love you enough to change you, to make your life better, to make you happy. I'm going to bring enough love and fix to this family that everything's going to be okay and we're going to live
Mhm.
happily ever after.
yes.
And
Mhm.
you know what I learned is, what good did my love do any of them? Nothing. I remember
Yeah.
Mhm.
when my father was dying, all of a sudden it was like I heard God say to me, Jody, look and see what good my love couldn't do nothing to help or fix
Nothing.
them. Nothing.
Mhm.
God's love. It's grace and mercy, right? Like, you guys need a power way above who I am. And I
Mm.
am hard pressed to actually see the goodness in my parents. And I know people are going to not like me saying that. But as I get older and have lived, and honestly, you guys, look at the demonstration of who they were. It has
Mhm.
been cruelty after cruelty after
Mhm.
cruelty.
Mhm.
I have watched my brother almost destroy himself because incest wants you dead. Do not get me wrong. Incest wants you dead, and they will do nothing to step in and intervene. He's had his fifth heart attack. He drinks, he smokes, he's been snorting whatever he could snort
Mhm.
since he was in his 20s. Do you think anybody cares?
Mhm.
So I'm hard pressed to see that there's any
Mhm.
good in people that won't step in their own flesh and blood and say, oh my God, I've
Mhm.
given you a fatal wound. Could I
Mhm.
Yeah.
please do something to help? They
Yeah.
don't. They don't care.
No.
So, just in
That's
all
really
honesty,
something to hear you say that, Jody,
Mhm.
that yeah, this will kill you.
Mhm.
yes,
Incest will kill you. And you
yes,
can't you can't forget that. How many people commit suicide over this or kill
yes.
Mhm.
themselves with addiction and on and on. And it's a fight for your life,
It
right?
Mhm.
is.
Right.
And
Mhm.
nobody
So
helped me fight for my life. You guys,
yeah.
rather, they held my head underwater and said, try to find air. And after
Mhm.
years of having my head underwater and drinking, I mean, trying to breathe like a fish when I was a human, I gave up. And I said, you
Yeah.
guys
Mhm.
are still, you're trying to kill me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if it's not giving life, what's it giving? It's giving death. To me,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
you cannot, in matters of this kind of thing, I really feel that God has put this huge thing on my heart to say, go make a strong line, and particularly with
Mhm.
incest, because people are dying in these lines. And you
Yes.
know
Mhm.
what, you guys, they're dying and they're not making it out. And then people are hiding pedophiles because they got to look good. Excuse
Yeah.
me? So you're going to let a
Yeah.
child get raped in the back room so that you can look good? Excuse me?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
can't, you
That's
guys.
exactly what happened in my family.
What the
And
Mm-hmm.
hell is going
the
on?
the ease of ignoring
Yes.
is shocking, and it is the complete opposite of love. It's complete self-centeredness.
And
And
that, yes,
Are they
right.
in contact with this, quote,
yes.
brother of yours?
Yes, so I have verbalized it, feels
Unbelievable.
that they have chosen him over me because this is how I see it. This was their project. They took this on,
Mm-hmm.
and this troubled person welcomed them into their home, got him through his adolescence, their his family, but at the cost of me,
Yep.
which they need to keep hidden.
Well, they make him
Um,
look good. They
And they
make
make
him look
themselves look
good.
good.
Yes.
And they
We're the
make
good
themselves
parents, right?
Have you
so
looked into pressing charges on him?
I have been asked that from the first time I called the employee assistance program of my husband when I fell apart, right? Finally
Yeah.
fell apart. And um I have not. I have not. And partly because, well, the statute of limitations, and it was a gray area because
Right.
he was only 4.5 years older than I was. And by law, it has to be 5 years in
Is that
Oh,
California.
right?
Yeah.
wow.
And with my father, I can't remember if I was over 18 when he finally actually assaulted me. He was hinting at things, objectifying me, commenting about my body, all sorts of kind of freaky, yucky things. But then when an actual assault occurred, I can't place how old I was. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really like I don't have enough for there to be something there. I have reported my sister's family to Child Protective Services because I'm very concerned about how they treat their children.
Mm.
Um, because she's still in it.
Is that right?
She's still in the charade. She's still
And
completely connected to my parents.
I
Mhm.
love that you brought that up, Carol, about doing what you can.
Mm-hmm.
I also went to the local authorities with my mom, with my mother did indecent exposure. She took baths in front of me as a child, in front of my nephew, and then my daughter. That's 3 generations, you guys, when
Yeah.
I started talking
Mm,
about it. So I did call because should anything happen, and anybody that's listening, if you have
mm,
the strength to protect the people behind you, call a local
mm,
authorities just to say, I don't need to press charges for myself, but I want this on record to protect the people behind me.
Yeah.
Because
mm.
if they come forward, they've got cooperation. Because if we don't
Ah,
start creating cooperation,
Yeah.
these crimes, you
mm,
guys, they're the best crimes of hell. Because like that, sibling incest is right behind father-daughter incest. And guess what? It's not prosecutable most of the time. This is,
yeah.
you guys, these are crimes of hell that we've got to start doing something about to help. And it's our voices are our biggest power. Our
Yes.
voices
Speak
are our
out
biggest
about it.
power.
Mhm.
Right. Let
Yeah, well, thank
everybody
you for
know.
that challenge. I've just had such a hard time with the
I
whole
know. It's
growth
very, very
process,
difficult.
and I need to think on it and decide
Yeah.
if and how
Right.
to do that because I have thought on it and I haven't taken action. So, except
Well,
for
Well,
calling about my sister because I felt like that was something that was I had something real,
yeah.
like solid enough.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the unfortunate fact is that they're not going to probably do anything. So,
right.
Mhm.
if you think the whole world's going to come crashing on them, that's not really how it goes. You'll be
Mhm.
very lucky if they do anything. It's like calling CPS.
It's true.
Mhm.
However, his name will be in the system, and
Yes, again, it's documented.
if he
Right.
ever
That's such a good
abuses
point.
again, you've got
Mhm.
cooperation. And
Yeah.
that is something that if every abuser on this planet went to our court systems and asked for help, they would be overran. There was this whole article about it because there's so many people in hiding. But remember, if you're listening, somebody else, abusers don't just touch one person. I mean, it's
No.
almost unheard of. So
Yep.
to start cooperation for other people who are hurt, everybody go tell. Just even say, I don't want anything from
Speak
you, but I
up.
want this on the record so
Yes.
that
Mhm.
he, in
Mm-hmm.
case he abuses again, this won't happen because you break down a pedophile one secret at a time. So just start exposing those
Yeah.
secrets. It really is true.
That's absolutely true. Yeah.
And Carol, didn't you tell me one time that your brother came to you too about some sexual hanky
Mm.
panky? This is funny, Emily. Carol and I were chatting, and it could have been before we were actually recording because we often do this.
Yeah.
But she said her brother came to her, and my brother came to me in my 20s and said, "Don't you remember what we
Do you
used to
remember
do?"
this?
Yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
like,
Mm.
"No, actually, I
Yeah, I
don't."
know. I think that,
Oh.
yeah. Yeah.
And so the thing about these stories is it takes years and years because there are real big fatal wounds and then there's all these little fatal wounds that happen to us.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And sibling incest usually is not as great, although I did go through a couple memories of my brother and it was really violent and I didn't want it.
Mhm.
And I love
Mhm.
that he said what we did. And then when Carol said that too, her brother
Not
came to her
what
and
we
said, it's
did.
not what we
Not what we
did.
did.
Exactly.
No.
My brother raped me. And, I went to my mom and said, Mom, Mark raped me. And you know what she said? Oh, Jody, he lived in the same house. He got the same abuse you did. Just let it go,
Wow.
basically. Wow. So
Wow.
everybody can rape everybody because we just come from a
Wow.
raping household. That was her honest answer to me. And I just thought, what the fuck? I mean, I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
honestly, it's like, seriously?
And you can't say enough about how mothers are not standing up
They're not.
Mhm.
for their
Mhm.
child. And
They're not.
I think about it like how much of it is just financial?
Yeah.
I don't know, but I mean, women have got to be able to support their own families
Yep.
so they can walk away when there's any kind of problem, they
It's so
have to
true.
protect their children. And I hear this over and over
Yep.
again. And
Yep.
it's just
Yep.
so keeps it going. It's unbelievable.
I have not heard a story where they're like, no, my mom was really strong and confronted
Yes,
everything. It doesn't exist
right. It
because
doesn't happen.
abusers have to get a person who keeps the narrative alive and makes the family look good and they're all both looking good together. Like you said, Carol, the systems are so horribly, miserably broken in these
Yep.
families.
Mhm.
And
Yes,
so,
the
you
whole
know,
system.
it really
Yep.
is true. Well, we're at
Mhm.
time, you guys. Is there anything that you'd like to say before we go? I think there was a ton in this. I loved
Yeah.
that comment that someone said, "Thank you. This was so helpful." And it's really different listening to people who have the experience and have lived through it, walking through it. I believe that I'm gonna be healing till I go back to God one day,
Me
and
too.
Mhm.
and so I think it's so beautiful. I just want to thank you guys again for being here. Next week I've got to interview with someone else, but we'll continue to do these panels because I just think they're beautiful. But if you guys would like to leave anything that you feel is really important, because I am going to give you guys the accolades that you deserve. You guys are both putting in and have put in the hard work to be where you sit today and who you are. And so
Mm.
I'd love
Thank
to
you.
give
Mm.
you a minute just to say anything that you'd like to.
No, just, to be speaking up and say it often because
Mhm.
if your family has sexual abuse, it's going to happen to the next generation if you're
Mhm.
not really on your game
It
and
will
speaking
happen
up
to the next
about it. It
generation.
will
Mhm.
happen. And this goes on and on. And when people tell you it's not true, to forget about it, just move
Mhm.
on, that those are not supportive people. Those are not good people to have in your life. So,
Mhm. Is it my turn?
yes.
Yes.
Well, all I'm thinking about is I have work to do. And so if you're feeling that way, you're not alone. Like, I think I'm in
Mhm.
the midst of it. I'm in the
Always,
midst of
yeah.
still having more come to light. And so we're in all of
Mhm.
us are in this together, growing. And what I think is so valuable is to come together to share and to learn from each other and be challenged to take the next step.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Oh, it's
So
so beautiful.
yeah.
That is so
That's right.
true. I wanted to
Mhm.
leave with this one really kind of cool story. Everybody knows the story of Noah. God comes to him. He says, build this ark. Noah begins to build this ark. People make fun of him. It takes him years and years and years, but then there's no rain, and then the rain starts. I bet people weren't making fun of him. But the point that I want to bring up about this story is in Genesis 7:16. It says, the animals going in were male and female of every living thing, as God had commanded Noah. And the next thing is hugely important. It says, then the Lord shut him in. And I
Mm.
guess for anybody listening, it's really hard to get out of incestuous families. And may
Yeah.
God shut you in this week. May He give you the strength to do the things that you need to do. But I love that. If He wouldn't have shut Noah in, I assume Noah would have kept that door open. To Carol's point about how we love family, we don't know how to shut them out. Noah
Mhm.
probably would have let everything on that was trying to actually, God was trying to get rid of. Whether you believe the story or not, I think it's a wonderful concept of God shut the door for me, because sometimes we let shit in that
Mhm.
we just really shouldn't. So
Mhm.
anyway, if you like what we're doing, please hit subscribe, share, follow us, and let us know by comment or send me an email about anything that you'd like us to to discuss, we'd be happy to do that. I've worked all day. I'm tired. We love you. Have a wonderful day. Let's keep breaking down those pedophiles one
That's
secret at a
right.
time. We'll see you next time. Love you
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
thank
guys.
you.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.